Today I'm talking about my top 10 favorite movies from the great director Walter Hill. So let's rock this. Hi everyone, how you doing? Welcome back. I'm Fuzz, and yes, I am back, finally. I know I've been a little MIA over the last week and a half or so. I've just been focused on some other stuff while my kid was on spring break, so I kind of deprioritized the channel for a bit last week. But I'm back. I've got multiple videos I'm currently working on, and I will try to make it up to you guys over the next couple weeks or so. But today, I've got a top 10 list of my favorite Walter Hill movies. I've become a pretty big fan of this director in the last couple years, but I'll be the first one to admit that I was kind of a late bloomer on discovering most of his work. I mean, most of his older films I only saw for the first time within just like the last 2 or 3 years. Of course, there are a few of his movies that I'd seen and knew about prior to a few years ago. But for the most part, many of his films are ones that just never really came across my radar until just the last few years. So I've been on a bit of a Walter Hill kick lately, and I even created a Walter Hill section in my own physical media collection. In fact, I even added a few more of his movies to my collection just within the last couple weeks in preparation for this video. There were a couple titles of interest that I'd just not seen yet, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to watch them before completing this list. So I just wanted to share a little bit of my enthusiasm about Walter Hill's work with you guys today, and maybe even suggest a few titles that you haven't seen yet. You know, I just love the style of Walter Hill's films, even though it's kind of tricky for me to like put my finger on exactly why. But he does have a unique kind of signature style, even though it might be kind of difficult for me to define. A lot of his films have this sort of grittiness and rawness to them that convey like a certain sense of realism, right? While still remaining a little bit stylized at the same time. His films can be edgy and even a little brutal at times, but I'll tell you, they are just a whole lot of fun to watch. Of course, Walter Hill is a veteran of the film industry. He's been around a long time, he's worn a lot of different hats, and he's made a lot of movies. He's been a producer on pretty much the entire Alien franchise, if I'm not mistaken. Even Prometheus and Alien Covenant, he got a production credit on those as well. And then he also co-wrote Aliens, one of the greatest sci-fi action films of all time, certainly my favorite. And he's also been a pretty versatile director as well. You know, he's made a lot of different types of movies, and the genres he's explored have been all over the map. His movies have incorporated elements of action films, crime dramas, thrillers, musical dramas. He's dipped into sci-fi, of course, westerns, period films, and even a little bit of comedy. So he's been a very interesting and respected director with a very long career. And as such, today I've ranked my top 10 favorite films by Walter Hill. And of course, as usual, I also have a few honorable mentions that I'll be tacking on to the end of the list, so make sure you stick around for those as well. Okay, so without any further ado then, let's just get right into this list. Starting off with number 10, we've got Last Man Standing. Little Bruce Willis action. No, I'm not talking about The Last Boy Scout. Got just Last Man Standing here. But great film. This is one that I only saw for the first time the other night. This is one that I finally got around to picking up. And of course, I picked it up because I didn't have the Last Boy Scout in my collection either. And I figured it was about time that I got a physical media copy of both of these films. And I gotta tell you, this film turned out to be way better than I was thinking it was going to be. I had it in my mind for years that there were a couple Bruce Willis films that just weren't very good, and so I never got around to checking them out. One of them was Last Man Standing, the other one was Hudson Hawk. And I don't know, if any of you guys have anything to say about Hudson Hawk that's positive, let me know in the comments down below, because I still have it in my mind that that movie is probably not worth bothering with. But this movie I really liked and was pleasantly surprised to find that it was as good as it actually is. Got a solid cast here, of course, Bruce Willis, Bruce Dern, and Christopher Walken makes an appearance in this film, and he does an awesome job with the role that he's given here. Now, the funny thing about this is this isn't the kind of film I normally get into as much. I'm not a huge fan of what I would consider period films, right? And this is a Prohibition era kind of a period film in a way. Although it's also kind of a Western as well, almost like a Prohibition era Western. Basically, Bruce Willis is this kind of lone rogue dude who rolls into this town that is on the verge of dying, on the verge of becoming a ghost town, and he finds himself caught in the middle of a conflict between two rival gangs in that town. It's a fairly action-packed and violent film, and I was totally here for it. I really enjoyed it. So if you've never seen Last Man Standing, I would definitely recommend it. It was way better than I thought it was going to be, and it was just a whole lot of fun. So yeah, Last Man Standing at my number 10. Moving on to number 9, we've got Bullet to the Head. Little Sylvester Stallone action here. Of course, I'm a big Stallone fan, so I was excited when I found out that Walter Hill had made a Stallone movie. I think I saw this for the first time last year, and I didn't even know it existed. So yeah, this is a fun ride. Stallone basically plays an aging hitman who has to team up with a young cop played by Sung Kang, Han of Fast and Furious fame, for those who don't know. So Stallone's character teams up with Sung Kang's character. They're on opposite sides of the law, but they have a common enemy that and a common interest in making sure this person is brought to justice one way or another. Of course, you got Jason Momoa as the bad guy, or one of the bad guys in this film. And I gotta admit, I'm not a big Jason Momoa fan. He kind of sucks. The way I look at Jason Momoa, I think of him as just a beefcake that Hollywood sticks in the films for the chicks. But it's a fun film, action-packed ride. So if you've never seen it, yeah, I would definitely recommend checking it out. Bullet to the Head at number 9. Okay, moving on next to number 8. We have a great little crime drama thriller from 1992, and that is Trespass, which stars Bill Paxton, William Sadler, Ice-T, and Ice Cube. This is a great film. It's essentially about a couple of firemen from Arkansas who get wind of essentially a treasure, some stolen gold that is hidden in like an abandoned building somewhere in East St. Louis. And so they make the trek to East St. Louis to try and see if they can get their hands on this. And things don't go well. They end up in this predicament that, it's not good. It's a bad scene for them. Their lives are at risk and whatnot. So I won't say anything more beyond that, but it's a great film. If you've never seen it, I definitely recommend checking it out when you get the chance. You've got some great tension in it, some great suspense, and it's just a fun ride. So Trespass at number 8. And moving on next to number 7, we've got a 1989 film called Johnny Handsome. This is one I'd never even heard of up until about, a month or two ago, and saw it for the first time then. Great film, and you got to check out this cast. I mean, this has an incredible cast. Who we got here? We've got Mickey Rourke, of course, he's in the lead role, but we also have Morgan Freeman, Lance Henriksen, Forrest Whitaker, Ellen Barkin, and Elizabeth McGovern. I mean, that's just an incredible cast. You just can't go wrong with a cast like that. As for the story, the film is about a low-level petty thief, kind of thug, who has this really deformed face, and he gets essentially gets double-crossed by his partners when he's trying to pull off a robbery, and ends up getting sent to prison. Well, some things happen while he's in prison, and he essentially gets a new face and new identity, and he's got revenge on his mind. And I'll just leave it at that. I won't say any more. But it's a really good film, great crime drama thriller, very suspenseful. It's just a well-written and well-acted film. So if you've never seen Johnny Handsome, this is one I would definitely recommend checking out, especially if you're a Walter Hill fan, but you've never seen this one. You should definitely give it a try at some point. Johnny Handsome at number 7 for me. Okay, next up, moving on to number 6, we've got a great film called Extreme Prejudice. This is from 1987. Great film with Nick Nolte, Powers Booth, Michael Ironside, who's always awesome. He's such a great character actor, and I just love Michael Ironside. Pretty much in anything he's in, I always dig his work. And then you've also got Maria Conchita Alonso, who I'll admit I'm not the biggest fan of. She used to show up in a lot of these movies back in the day. You know, this one, The Running Man. I can't remember what else she was in, but it always seems like she was in a lot of 80s movies. But this is a great action crime drama with Nick Nolte playing a Texas Ranger and Powers Booth being a longtime friend who is on the opposite side of the law. He's like a big drug dealer, drug kingpin, I guess. And so ultimately there ends up being this big conflict between the two of them. And there's more to the story than that. Actually, quite a bit more to the story than that, but I won't say too much more. I'll just leave it at that. But a really good film, and I think a lot of people consider this to be one of Walter Hill's better films. I certainly think it's a great film, but today it only comes in at number 6 for me. There's 5 other films that I like more. So, but yeah, Extreme Prejudice at number 6. Okay, getting into the top 5 now. We've got kind of a musical action crime drama, kind of a funky little, almost like a fantasy type film, right? Because it takes place in an alternate reality. And I'm talking about Streets of Fire. What year did this come out? This is 1984. And what's cool about this is you get to see a very young Diane Lane in this one. You know, I don't know if I'd ever seen her in any of her early roles prior to watching this movie. It seems like everything I'd seen her in was like, you know, post-90s or whatnot. But yeah, she was cool in this. Walter Hill bills this movie as kind of a rock and roll fable. That, like I said, takes place in apparently some kind of funky alternate reality that has a lot of 50s vibes, right? The cars look older, like classic cars from the 50s. Yeah, it's just a really cool film. The music in this film is fantastic. It's one of the best things about the film, although the story's cool as well. Essentially, in this alternate reality, Diane Lane plays this rock star named Ellen Aim, and she basically gets kidnapped at the beginning of the film by a motorcycle gang. The leader of this gang is played by Willem Dafoe, another, like one of his earlier roles, one of his earliest roles, not his first role, but certainly a very, very young Willem Dafoe in this movie. And then ultimately what happens is the woman's ex-boyfriend, played by Michael Pare of Eddie and the Cruisers fame, he's brought in as kind of a mercenary to try and rescue her from this gang. You've also got Rick Moranis in this, as well as Amy Madigan. So it's just a really fun film. It's got a lot of style to it, and also the 4K on this looks incredible. Now, I had never seen this film before I picked up this 4K. I got it around the time it first came out. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before when this came out, but that was the first time I saw it, and I really enjoyed it. And I've never seen previous versions of this film on home media, so I can't really compare, but I can tell you that, Shout Factory always delivers on the 4Ks, and the restoration just looks really good. It's a great looking image. So if you've never seen Streets of Fire, I would definitely recommend it. It's a really fun film with a whole lot of heart. And yeah, so check it out. That's my number 5. Okay, and coming in at number 4, we've got one here that I think is a kind of a bit of a classic, and that is 48 Hours. Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy. This was one of the films of Walter Hill's that I used to watch all the time. It was one of those few films of his that I was aware of prior to a few years ago. I've always loved this film. I've always thought it was just a really fun time. You got this kind of a buddy cop, or in this case, buddy cop and con type story. It's both amusing and action-packed. Yeah, you just really can't go wrong with something like this. hours. And for this entry, I also am going to cheat a little bit because whenever I watch the first 48 hours, I always go right into another 48 hours right after that. I always like to watch both of these. Whenever I'm in the mood to watch 48 hours, as soon as I'm done with it, I'm usually in the mood to watch the sequel as well. And apparently these sequels came out like 8 years apart, so there was some time between them. I'll be the first to admit another 48 hours is not as good as the original classic, but I still think it's an entertaining film, and it has a lot of the same vibes, right? So yeah, you just can't go wrong with these films. But Eddie Murphy in this first one, I mean, he's absolutely hilarious, right? Some of the stuff he does and says, really classic stuff. One of Eddie Murphy's best performances, I think, as well. So yeah, for my number 4, we've got both 48 hours and another 48 hours. By the way, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, do me a favor and please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, don't forget to hit that notification bell as well so you can be alerted whenever I'm posting videos that you might be interested in. And also don't forget to like the video as well. It really helps with the channel's visibility out there on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Okay, next up for number 3, we've got The Warriors on 4K here. This is an amazing set from Arrow Video, and I've talked about it before on this channel, brought it up a couple other times, so I'll probably keep my comments pretty brief here. Of course, this is the, as you can see, the chunky box, right? And limited edition. I believe this may actually be out of print now. It came out in December, but I think it sold pretty quickly. You may only be able to get the standard edition 4K of this. I don't know if these chunky boxes are still available. I mean, you could probably still get it on eBay on the secondary market or whatnot. You're just going to pay a little bit more for it probably. But this is a fantastic movie, fantastic restoration too. I believe I think this was my favorite 4K of the year last year, or pretty damn close. So yeah, the restoration just looks stunning on this. It certainly looks, I assume, it probably looks better than it ever has. I did have a Blu-ray prior to this, and this definitely blows the old Blu-ray out of the water. And yeah, it just looks amazing on the format. Great film. A pretty simple premise. You know, it's about a gang that's a street gang that is trying to get back home, and I'll just leave it at that. There's more to it than that, but I'll just leave it at that if you've never seen it. Fun film, a lot of fun, and this film has a whole lot of heart to it, a whole lot of character, and you just can't go wrong with something like this. So yes, for my number 3, we've got The Warriors on 4K. At number 2, we have a movie that came out the year before The Warriors. The Warriors came out in '79. This one, The Driver, came out in 1978, and it was a tough choice. You know, this one, between this and The Warriors, some people might take exception for me ranking this one higher than The Warriors, but I just really like this one just a tiny bit more. They're both very close. This is just a great kind of minimalist film starring Ryan O'Neal and Bruce Dern. It's a whole lot of fun. But there's not a whole lot to it. It's a very, very simple premise. It's essentially about a getaway driver, a gun for hire who's, you know, supposed to be like one of the best in the business or in the area. You know, various crews looking to pull off a heist or whatever, they will hire this guy to be their wheelman. So that's what this film is about. It's about this getaway driver and this unhinged loony cop played by Bruce Dern, which, you know, Bruce Dern is really good at playing a loon, isn't he? I mean, he's done it for a lot of movies. I think it just comes naturally to him. So Bruce Dern is this cop that has got a total hard-on for this getaway driver, right? And he's on the case. He is trying to nail this guy, and that's essentially what the film is about. It's a game of cat and mouse between the driver and the detective. But Bruce Dern's great in this. And so is Ryan O'Neal. I mean, he's got a very subdued, kind of mellow performance. You know, doesn't say a whole lot of words or whatnot, but it's a really fun movie, and you got some amazing car chases in this, old school car chases, you know, the way they should be filmed. And it looks great on 4K as well. It doesn't look as good as The Warriors. I mean, The Warriors is a truly outstanding restoration, but I think Studio Canal did a pretty good job for this one. And from what I understand, this is an accurate presentation, you know, accurate to the source, accurate to the original theatrical presentation. So apparently it's probably the best it's ever looked on 4K. I never saw this on any other format. This was the first time I'd seen this film when I picked up this 4K, but it looked good. It looked like, you know, like I would expect a film like this to look. But to be clear, I would not call this a reference disc at all. It's a decent 4K and it looks good for what it is, but it's not the kind of disc that you would necessarily want to like show off your system to other people with, right? But if you're a fan of Walter Hill, and if by some chance you've never seen this movie, it's a great movie. Very minimal, but very effective. So yeah, The Driver at number 2. And then for my number 1 choice, my favorite Walter Hill film, at least as of right now. That could change next year. That could change in a couple years. Who knows? But as of right now, I'm pretty sure that Southern Comfort is my favorite. This is a fantastic film. It's really good. Great cast starring Powers Booth, Keith Carradine. You got Fred Ward in here. You got Peter Coyote. So yeah, really good film. Now I'm not going to say too much about this because my very first 4K takeaways video about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, I did more of an in-depth exploration of this 4K. So make sure you check out that video when you get the chance if you want to learn more about this release. But really good Vinegar Syndrome 4K release, also in their version of the chunky box, which is the VSU box. And I just love the packaging on this, love the movie. Really no complaints about this at all. Great movie, great packaging, great release in general. And so yeah, my number 1, Southern Comfort. Okay, so that wraps it up for my top 10. But of course, as usual, I do have a few honorable mentions, not too many today, just a few. So let's get right into that. My first honorable mention, he's kind of, Walter Hill kind of went into the comedy zone a little bit with this one. And this is one I used to watch all the time. Back in the 80s, and that is Brewster's Millions. You've got Richard Pryor here. You've got John Candy. This one is kind of a classic, I think, and from what I understand, I guess this is actually a remake of an older film, but I never saw the original film. But this one I used to watch all the time in the 80s. I love this film. I feel like it was always playing on cable TV, HBO or Showtime or whatnot. During this time, and whenever it was on, I feel like I came across it on TV a lot and ended up watching it quite often back in the day. But this is a great film, just a funny film. You know, it's got kind of an interesting premise, right? Richard Pryor is essentially this minor league baseball player who finds out he has this inheritance from some long-lost relative he didn't even know he had. And but this long-lost relative decides to kind of mess with Richard Pryor's character in this and make his life a little bit difficult in order to get that money. And essentially what he does, if you've never seen it, essentially the premise is that he's inheriting all this money, but he has to jump through some hoops in order to get it, right? The guy who's the relative who's giving him this money lays out a condition where he has to spend $30 million in 30 days and not have anything left to show for it at the end of those 30 days, other than just the clothes on his back. And if he's able to do that, then he'll inherit 300 million, right? So, and the other catch here is he's not allowed to tell anybody why he's spending his money so recklessly and trying to spend so much money so fast. So as you can imagine, that makes for a pretty amusing situation here. And so I just love this movie. And if you've never seen it and you're a fan of comedy and Richard Pryor and John Candy, this is one I would definitely recommend. So yeah, Brewster's Millions is my first honorable mention. Then we also got Red Heat here from 1988, little Arnold action, Jim Belushi. This is a pretty good film. It's not one of my favorite Walter Hill films, but I thought it was at least worth mentioning. It's entertaining enough. It's essentially kind of a buddy cop movie, although it's got a little bit more seriousness to it than it's not like a comedy necessarily. But Arnold is this Russian detective who gets paired up with a Chicago cop, Jim Belushi's character, and they're trying to, they've got a mutual interest in taking out this pretty deadly, I think, drug dealer or drug smuggler or something. So great film. It's definitely worth checking out if you've never seen it. And if you're a fan of Walter Hill's work, I got this just to kind of continue my Walter Hill collection. And I think I may have seen it back in the 80s when it first came out, but I didn't really remember it very well. So picking up this 4K, it felt in many ways kind of like the first time watching it. Even though I'm pretty sure I saw at least parts of it back in the day. So, but Red Heat for my next honorable mention. Next up is a sci-fi movie called Supernova, starring James Spader, Angela Bassett, Lou Diamond Phillips is in this, Robert Forster's in this, and some other people as well. I thought this was a fairly entertaining movie. This is one I just got within the last couple weeks. I feel like I saw parts of it at one point in the 90s, but I don't think I ever saw the entire film. And it felt like I was kind of watching it for the first time when I watched this a couple weeks back. But, I thought it was a fairly enjoyable ride. It is a kind of a sci-fi horror movie. Think in terms of Event Horizon. Although, Event Horizon, I think, is probably a little better. It's not as good as Event Horizon, but it's still fairly entertaining. This movie, I think, was kind of set up to fail. It wasn't handled very well by MGM, apparently. Get this. Apparently, some exec or whoever was in charge of this thing at MGM, when Walter Hill was directing it, they wanted to do a test screening. The problem is they wanted to do a test screening before any of the visual effects, the special effects, had been completed for this film. So now if you can imagine going to a test screening of a science fiction film that doesn't have any of the visual effects completed yet, I mean, that's going to be a problem, right? You're probably not going to rate that film very high. Well, apparently that didn't occur to the executive at MGM who made that decision. And Walter Hill even tried to get him not to do this test screening. He said, dude, you can't show this movie without the visual effects. It's science fiction. They need to be there before you do a test screening. It's not going to go well if you do a test screening without them. Well, apparently this yo-yo at MGM didn't take that to heart and went ahead with the test screening anyway. And of course, predictably, the film wasn't received very well at the test screenings. So apparently Walter Hill was so put off by this whole situation that he just quit. And he left the set and said, I'm out of here. I'm not going to do this anymore. And so they had to bring in another director to do some reshoots. And then they even brought in Francis Ford Coppola to edit the final film to try and salvage what they had. But it really wasn't set up for success from the beginning. They started with one budget, they cut the budget, they kind of hosed Walter Hill on this. And I think he probably just didn't want to have anything to do with it once they did that. And in fact, they even used a pseudonym for the director's name. It's under the name Thomas Lee, but it is a Walter Hill film. So yeah, just kind of an interesting story with this one. But it's worth checking out if you've never seen it. It's not an amazing sci-fi film, but I figured it was at least worth mentioning for those of you who are sci-fi fans or sci-fi horror fans. If you haven't seen this one, yeah, check it out. Although you may have a hard time finding this Blu-ray, or you'll probably be able to find it, but it may not be that cheap. I believe this Blu-ray is out of print, and this is a Scream Factory Blu-ray. So I don't know if it's in print anymore. The price point seems to be a little bit higher out there, whether it's Amazon or eBay or whatnot. So, but yes, Supernova. And then for my last honorable mention, I wanted to briefly bring up the movie Crossroads, which up until, I don't know, a year or two ago, I didn't even know was a Walter Hill movie. This movie came out in 1986. It's kind of a bit of a musical odyssey, I guess you could say. I mean, there's more to it than that, but, you know, it stars Ralph Macchio. You got Joe Seneca in here, Jamie Gertz, Joe Morton, and Steve Vai, guitarist, makes an appearance in this film. Essentially, Ralph Macchio is like this virtuoso, like classical guitarist who is, and young, like young kid, right? And he's really passionate about the blues, right? And he goes on this quest. He wants to hunt down this like lost song by Robert Johnson. It's been many, many years since I've seen this film. I haven't seen it probably since the 80s, maybe early 90s. But essentially, he wants to basically learn this long lost blues song by Robert Johnson, blues legend, right? And he hunts down, he hooks up with this guy who he thinks can help him. And there's just some funky stuff involved here. It's, you know, there's this whole thing about selling the soul to the devil. And Steve Vai, actually, what I love about this, my favorite thing about this film is that Steve Vai plays basically the devil's guitarist, right? The devil's like championship guitarist who can out-shred any other guitar player out there, right? If you do a shred off. So that was fun. And the you know, the end of the film where all that kind of goes down is just a whole lot of fun to watch. So yeah, if you've never seen Crossroads, that might be one you want to check out at some point, especially if you're a big fan of the blues. Okay, so that about wraps it up for my top 10 favorite Walter Hill movies on physical media. Let me know what you think of my choices in the comments down below. Remember, I always love hearing from you guys. And if there are any movies here that you've not seen before that look interesting to you, let me know which ones caught your attention. I always love hearing about which movies I've discussed that have piqued your interest, that have made you want to pick them up or check them out. So make sure you leave some feedback down below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, share if you're feeling so inclined. Thank you so much for watching today, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you soon.